On this channel, I spend a lot of time saying negative things about the current video game industry and just video games in general. Recently, I made a video talking about how I'm losing interest in video games, that video games don't really captivate me like they used to when I was younger. And, I would just talk. I just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about so much negativity, right? I admit that is a big flaw that I have, is that I can be very negative at times. I don't really like to see things as a glass half full, you know what I mean? So, yeah, a lot of my commentary and analysis tends to have a sort of negative spin to it, especially when it comes to my opinion on the new consoles, my opinion, when it comes to the whole PC versus console, the platform wars, when it comes to a whole bunch of things, right? I think that's a thing that a lot of you guys have picked up on, is that there's a lot of negativity. But I want to tell you guys sort of a positive story, except it's also a little bit sad and a little dark. So I guess there is negativity in this video as well. But I wanted to tell the story because, I've been spending a lot of time lately reflecting on a lot of the negative things about video games, especially modern video games with the microtransactions and, just video games me not having that enjoyment that I once had when I was younger, right? And especially in the 7th generation, the 6th generation, those were the best times, in my opinion, to play video games. I think once the 8th generation happened, something changed, right? So I talk a lot about that. But, I tend to have, kind of blocked out a lot of the positives as well. A lot of the good that video games have done for me. Because I think a lot about the bad, about how things are right now. But I think it's always good to look back and reflect on a lot of the good times. And I remember a few years ago, it was 2017. It was right after, at the end of my run as the console king. And to those of you who were around back then, remember that whole fiasco. But I stopped. I was no longer the console king. I took a few months of a break from YouTube. And I got my shit together. Not just for YouTube, but my personal life as well. And I started loving YouTube, in a way that I never did before. Because, let's be honest, I fucking relished in the fact that so many people viewed me in such a negative way, that they went out of their way to make video responses, to leave hate comments. The like to dislike ratio, whenever I saw it on my videos, I just couldn't stop laughing. And that's my honest opinion. The hate never really bothered me on YouTube, because I always disconnected the people that were online from reality. I just saw names on a screen and avatars, and I didn't really see real people in those videos that were leaving comments, even though I knew subconsciously that they were real and that it was obviously real people. It just didn't affect me, because there's just a whole different dynamic, right? When people hate on you on the internet and say whatever they have to say about you online, and you having, people who go after you in real life. It's a completely different dynamic. People say cyberbullying is a thing, and don't get me wrong, I'm not a victim of cyberbullying. Everything that happened to me was my own responsibility, and I'm not trying to play the victim here. I don't even consider myself to be a victim, or I don't even consider that whole situation with my YouTube channel for all those years to even be a negative experience. This isn't really about that. But the point I'm trying to make is that I made a video, the first video I remember making, right after I was no longer the console king and decided, hey, let's just be my true self. Let's stop trying deliberately to rile people up, and just be your true authentic self, right? So I made a video that was very passionate, that was very heartfelt. I really dug deep into my emotions making that video. I don't know if you guys remember that video. It was titled "What Gaming Means to Me." And I spent a good while talking about a lot of the positive experiences I had playing video games as a child, and up until the point of adulthood, early adulthood, because right now I'm 21 turning 22. I just reflected on all the great experiences I had playing video games over the years, and it kind of reinvigorated my passion for YouTube in a way that I've never felt before. And one of those things that I sort of talked about, but I don't think I went too much in depth about it, but a lot of those times where I've been in a pretty dark place mentally, because there are a lot of events that were coming way too fast, and I just didn't know how to cope with it. And a couple of those things, one of them includes just having a really bad situation with my family. It wasn't necessarily me, but it was the other people in the family were going at each other, and it was a really bad living environment. So, I'd hate being at home. I'd hate being at school, because it's not like, I was a loser, I had no friends or anything like that. I had a lot of friends, actually. I'd hang out with all these people, and I would go out, but I didn't really feel like I made a true connection with most of those people. Of course, there were 2 or 3 people who actually considered close friends and actually confided in and was able to talk about things like this. But, when you're in high school, you don't really feel like all those people, you have all these friends, you hang out with all these people. That's the thing about school, high school and college. But how many of those people can you honestly say, like, that they're true friends, that you can talk about anything, right? So I was going through a lot of these things. There were like 2 or 3 people I was able to talk to about it, but they couldn't really relate to me, and even like having people to talk to, my whole thing is these people can't change what's happening to me, right? Whether it's my whole life just coming, like, what I felt was just my whole life just coming down around me and me having no control over it, and my whole family pretty much tearing each other apart. And my family's been through a lot over the years, but like around 2016, 2017, I mean, that was like the worst period, honestly, I could say in my entire life. There were so many times where I was just sad and alone, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And a lot of times it came to a point where I was thinking, why should I keep living? Like, why should I keep going through this? It wasn't just like one year, like I had a really bad year. Like, it was more of like, it was building up for a while. It started when my grandmother died. My whole family came apart, basically. I have no extended family, right? Like, so many people, they have these uncles, their aunts, their cousins, and they have all these other people. I don't really have that, because the family just came apart, and my grandmother was kind of like the person that kept us all together. And when she passed away, things changed, and not in a good way. But then when my immediate family started breaking apart as well, and that really took a toll on me, especially I was just so close to graduating high school, and I just wanted to enjoy my senior year. And all this stuff was happening at home, and I would go out to escape from it once in a while, but I just felt like, I need to be alone. Like, I have, hanging out is a good thing, but I feel like just having that alone time is so good, because you have time to think to yourself about what you're going to do, you know what I mean? And how you're going to deal with things. And video games was a real, was a great way to escape from my reality. And not in an unhealthy way, right? When you think of, like, escaping from reality, you think, like, avoiding your responsibilities, you think of, like, just ignoring the real world. Part of it was me kind of ignoring what was going on. Literally, like, a lot of my days would consist of, like, one time I was on, like, winter break, from school, right? And it was a point where a lot of my friends, and then this is another thing, I had all these friends, but then the friends that I was really close with started going their own way. One of them went to the military. Another one actually passed away, and that's another story. He died of cancer. And I had another friend who, I still lived in the same city, but we kind of not drifted apart. We still kept in contact and everything, but he got a new job because this was like right after high school. Going into college, he decided not to go to college. He was working full time, and he was working like a job, and he was working this, and he was doing that. So he was doing a lot of things. He was very busy, and he was very hard to like stay in touch with, to hang out with very often. So we kind of like not drifted apart, but I felt more alone than I did before, because I feel like my friends, especially like during the later part of high school, even though like most of the people I hung out with, I honestly like wouldn't really consider myself really close with, but the ones that I were close with, I mean, they really helped me through a lot of the stuff that I was going through at that point. Even like my dog, my dog passed away the same year, and like that honestly took a toll on me. It sounds stupid because it's just an animal, some people would say, but that dog really meant a lot to me, and she was like my support system in a lot of ways. Like I would just go to her and just like play with her, and just hang out with her, and she was non-judgmental because she couldn't talk back to me, you know what I mean? So that really took a toll on me, the friend passing away and the other friends just moving on, and my family just completely falling apart around me. And like I said, like not having those friends around like as much as you would maybe need them or think you need them, that also played into the feeling that I was alone, that I had nobody, life wasn't worth living. So I would use video games a lot to cope with that. And especially like, as time progressed, when people started drifting apart, like my friends, we were all living our own lives. And, this isn't me like trashing my friends or doing anything like that. Life happens, you know what I'm saying? So it's not me like saying, oh, I never had real friends. Like, people drift apart over time. It's natural. So if you're like 16, 17, 18, like you're about to graduate from high school and you think things will always be the same, they're going to change very quickly. When you're like in your 40s and when you're in your 50s, like 2 or 3 years is like the passage of time is nothing, right? 2 or 3 years is nothing. But when you're in that age, when you're like 18 to 21 years old, never mind 3 years, like 6 months, so much can change in that period of time, because that's the time we're all finding ourselves, figuring out who we are, and all that stuff. So, when I felt so alone, it would come to a point, like on winter break. I'm sorry, I'm just like going all over the place, but I'm not kind of used to talking about things like this on a public forum, so I'm sorry if it's all over the place. I didn't think this would be an appropriate thing to script and edit and make a whole production out of. I just think me talking in a webcam, even though that's out of focus very often, I should probably fix that at some point. But I just want to just talk. That's. I feel like my channel feels very robotic and not very personal. So I want to talk about these things more often. Things that I couldn't really talk about when I was going through it. Make a YouTube video. Yeah, when I was the console king, let's make a YouTube video about my depression and my loneliness. Oh yeah, people are gonna roast me, and it's deserved because I was kind of an asshole. But I would play Fallout 4 nonstop. I mean, to the point where, obviously if I had schoolwork or if I had anything like that I needed in order to function, I would get done. But in terms of like real life, I just tried to shut myself away from it as much as I could. I wouldn't necessarily call it an addiction. Maybe some people would classify it as that, even though I put a ridiculous amount of hours into games like Fallout 4. I mean, that was the game I was playing mostly. Just, playing the game, immersing myself in that world, building settlements, just doing things that calmed me down, made me relax, and I just felt good. Because this was a world, like the world of Fallout, you make choices, right? And you have so much control over what happens in that game to the point where even if you make a wrong choice, you can just go back to the save, to the last save that you had, and make a different choice if you regret the choice you made. But in life, like, you don't have that control. Of course, you have control over the decisions that you make and what you decide to do. But I feel like with video games, it's like, wow, I have all this control that I didn't have, that I felt like I haven't had with my life for so many years. And the thing is, like, it might sound like an unhealthy habit, and it might sound like it's actually very bad for your mental health to escape into that world for a certain amount of time, but I honestly feel that if I didn't have that way to escape, I don't know if I would still be here today. You know, and this isn't me trying to be dramatic. I actually came up with plans. You know, it went to the point where, you know, when I was at the lowest of lows, like, my mental state was completely, like, just really, really bad. I was in a really dark place. I was actually coming up with plans on, like, you know, how are we going to end this? And I was thinking, you know, I never actually made an attempt, but it was close. Like, I narrowed it down to two things. I'm either going to take a whole bunch of pills, or I'm going to jump off a bridge. You know, I kind of narrowed it down to those two things. Because, you know, I was thinking, okay, if I jump off a building, like, I'm going to be in a lot of pain. Like, you know, it'll be a pretty much instant death, but, like, you're going to be in a lot of pain. Hanging yourself, you're going to be choking for all that time. And I just wanted to stop feeling pain. And I didn't want to be in pain anymore. So I was thinking of, like, painless and quick ways to do it. I didn't have access to firearms or anything like that. Even if I did, I wouldn't have done that to my family. Just them, like, as much as, like, things were really bad and I felt like I didn't have a family anymore for the longest time, I still didn't feel like I should, that's the way I leave behind. You know what I mean? So yeah, I was thinking that. But you know, like, those thoughts were coming in my head, and obviously things eventually got better. Things are much better now, so don't worry about me now. But I feel like it was a lot easier for me to get through that dark time in my life, to have that mechanism to escape when you feel like you had nothing else. You know, playing Fallout 4, playing whatever game it may be. But it was mostly Fallout for me because I was really into that game back then. I put a ridiculous amount of hours into that. So, I feel like having that mechanism to just get away from everything really did a lot for me. And I honestly feel like video games saved my life. I mean, I don't know. For sure. There was a chance that I would have gotten through it. I would have found some other way to cope with it. But maybe instead of video games, maybe instead of Fallout, it would have been meth. You know, or fucking heroin. There are a lot of people I knew who got into that stuff, and there's a couple people I know who really got into those drugs and aren't with us anymore. You know, they died when they were 18, 19 years old. So, maybe it wasn't great to try to escape from my problems and not confront it as much as I probably should have. But I think considering the alternatives, like if you're really desperate for that escape, I think video games are kind of like an innocent escape that doesn't harm yourself physically. I mean, sure, you have some people who are like really into video games that, like, they don't even take a piss. And when their leg falls asleep, they just ignore it, and then they die because there was no circulation coming through their body. So, you know, it wasn't like that. But I would play games like 8 or 9 hours a day was the minimum, even with school. 8 or 9 hours a day was the minimum, and like it would come to a point where, like, there was one time I was on a winter break, and I kept mentioning the winter break story, and I never really got around back to it, and I'm sorry about that. I'm just like like, I don't know. Like I said, this is the first time I ever made a video like this, and who knows like how many, if I'll ever make more of these again. But I remember I had no time at all. Like, I had all this time to myself. I had no school, no nothing going on. My sleeping schedule was like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I would just get up, play whatever video game it is. Whether it was Fallout 4, it was like Mass Effect, or whatever game I was into. And it, like, I feel like there was that common trend, right? It was these narrative games where you have all these choices to make. You can control what happens in that world. You know, I feel like that was the common thing. I wasn't addicted to Call of Duty. I wasn't addicted to these online multiplayer games. I wasn't even these like games like these action games or whatever. No, it was like these specific types of games that I hadn't in common. And it was right around the time where I started to feel this deep depression that I started to get into these games in the first place, because like right before, I was a pretty big frag head. I was into all these first person shooters and everything. And I just noticed that now, talking to you guys, like just talking, that a big reason why I got into single player, why I got into these narrative-based games, like Mass Effect, like Fallout, Dragon Age, you name it. I feel like that's the thing. That's why. The thing I mentioned earlier about having control. But yeah, I'd sleep 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and just play video games for not even like 8 or 9 hours, sometimes even more than that. And just escape. Because I felt like I was very much alone. You know, my friends were kind of moving on to other things. Some of them weren't even with us anymore. So there was that. And I certainly didn't feel comfortable talking to my family about what I was going through, because they were the source of my problems. And I've tried to talk to them about it, but, you know, it's hard. Anyone who goes through family problems knows it's really hard. But, you know, that's the thing I can thank video games for, honestly. And as sad and deep and like depressing and dark as that time in my life was, I feel like the video games were a positive aspect of that. Like, I think of the game, the playing those games as like a very positive experience for me, because it was the only way that I was able to keep my sanity. So, yeah, I think definitely video games saved me. You know, if it wasn't like me actually going through with the certain plans that I may have had or whatever, it would at least kept me going, honestly. Like, there were times where I would come home, like, you know, I was going to school or whatever, or I was doing whatever I had to do, and my whole life was just everything around me was just fucked. I would just think, okay, I have Fallout 4 to look forward to. I'm going to build that settlement. I'm going to finish that building. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it was all related to video games. And I guess on the side, it was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna make a YouTube video and fuck with a few people. That was also a part of it. And that was kind of like an escape in and of itself, too. I don't know why I had so much fun pissing people off and spreading negativity when there was so much negativity happening to me. Maybe it was happening to me and I wanted to like reflect it back to other people. You know, that's something I don't know about, and maybe like talking to a professional. I mean, at this point, it was in the past. I don't really dwell on these things too much. But, you know, maybe that's something to consider. You know, that all those years of negativity, you know, maybe there was something happening to me in real life that made me decide to be negative. You know, maybe I couldn't have just like brushed it off. Okay, yeah, I was just young and I was stupid. You know, I was 13, I was 15, I was 17, whatever. You know, maybe there's something else to it. Maybe. But I think I'm gonna end the video here. I'm sorry. I've been promising you guys that I'd make shorter videos, and that I would like keep the length of videos down. I have a video coming out soon that will be short. and to the point. But I just felt like talking about this. Maybe I'll regret that one. Maybe I'll regret as soon as I hit the upload button. Maybe I'll regret that because it's very uncomfortable. It's not very pleasant. But I just felt like talking about it because I was just thinking about my YouTube channel and all the things that I've been talking about lately, about all this negativity. Well, this is something that's ironically enough also pretty negative and pretty dark and disturbing in some cases, but there is some positive to that, and I honestly believe that video games saved me, and I have a lot to thank video games for, and this is one of them. Definitely. Video games have definitely saved me in a way that I am very thankful for, but I don't consider it to be like an addiction or anything like that. I think it was a necessary escape in order to keep myself functional and to keep myself from just breaking down completely and ending up in a mental institute. As crazy as that sounds. Alright. Have a good day, everybody. I'm sorry that this was very dark, but hey, it is what it is. Have a good day, everybody.